20 hidden facts about Bonanza are waiting for you in this video, and even the most dedicated fans have never heard most of them. A singing scene so embarrassing it nearly killed the show before it aired. The real reason NBC kept a ratings disaster on the air for 2 full seasons, and a floating toupee incident that silenced an entire production crew, all form part of the true story behind television's longest-running Western, which turns out to be far more fascinating than anything the Cartwrights ever faced on screen. 14 seasons and 431 episodes defined Bonanza's dominance of American television. The first Western filmed entirely in color, the first to focus on family rather than gunfights, and at its peak, a show that captured nearly 6 out of every 10 televisions in America on Sunday nights. But behind that iconic burning map and the thunder of hooves across the Ponderosa, secrets and scandals and stories existed that never made it into TV Guide. Growing up watching Ben, Adam, Haas, and Little Joe ride across that beautiful Lake Tahoe scenery meant watching something that was almost nothing like what it seemed. The rugged Cartwright men weren't so rugged after all, and that stunning Nevada landscape was usually a Hollywood soundstage, while the wholesome family dynamic masked real tensions that threatened to tear the production apart. Time to head back to the Ponderosa, and this time, we're going behind the scenes.
Of course, I'd like to explain to you about Blake McCall.
You don't have to explain nothing to me, Miss Emily.
Hidden fact number 1. Bonanza was NBC's secret weapon to sell color televisions. Most people don't realize how close Bonanza came to never airing at all. Network executives seriously considered canceling the series before its premiere on September 12, 1959, and the reason came down to money. Filming in color cost 25% more than black and white production, and nobody knew whether audiences would care about the difference. NBC's parent company, RCA, faced a very specific problem they needed to solve, because they manufactured color television sets and desperately needed Americans to buy them. Fewer than 3% of American households owned a color TV at the time. Spending extra money on a color set made no sense when almost everything on television was broadcast in black and white. The solution turned out to be brilliant, transforming Bonanza into something far more significant than just another Western. RCA became the show's primary sponsor for its first 2 seasons, and that Saturday night 7:30 time slot was strategically chosen for a very specific reason, since that was prime shopping time. Department stores stayed open on Saturday evenings, and RCA wanted shoppers walking past their television displays to see the stunning Lake Tahoe scenery of Bonanza playing on those color sets. What the show became was essentially a weekly commercial for RCA's technology, and here's where it gets interesting. Bonanza flopped in that first season, finishing at number 45 in the Nielsen ratings after getting crushed by Perry Mason on CBS. By any normal standard, immediate cancellation should have followed. NBC kept it on the air anyway, not because anyone believed in the show's potential, but because they needed color programming to sell color televisions. A business decision with nothing to do with creative merit saved the Cartwrights. That decision would eventually pay off in ways nobody could have predicted, with Bonanza becoming the #1 show in America and holding that position for 3 consecutive seasons. But in those early days, the Cartwrights survived, not because of their popularity, but because they were the best salesmen RCA had. Hidden fact number 2. A secretary's casual question created the iconic Ponderosa name. The show wasn't originally called Bonanza, and the ranch wasn't originally called the Ponderosa, which might surprise you. Creator David Dortort had a completely different name in mind, and if not for a typing secretary asking a simple question, television history would sound very different. Panamint was Dortort's original title. Unless you're a mining history enthusiast, that word probably means nothing to you since it was an obscure mining term, a play on words meaning pan all day, and you make a mint. Clever, but not exactly memorable. The name change happened during a late-night writing session when Dortort worked with Joan Sherman, who served as executive secretary to NBC's head of West Coast production. A pause came as Sherman typed up the pilot script, wrote a description of the trees surrounding the Cartwright ranch. "What kind of trees were they?" she asked. "Ponderosa pines," Dortort replied, describing the magnificent trees that dot the Sierra Nevada landscape. Sherman looked up from her typewriter and made a suggestion that would echo through television history. "Why don't you call it the Ponderosa?" she asked. According to accounts from that night, Dortort exclaimed "Eureka!" And just like that, the most famous ranch in television history had its name. The word Ponderosa itself has an interesting origin, coming from the Latin word for ponderous or heavy, and Scottish botanist David Douglas named the tree back in 1826 because he was impressed by just how massive they were. From Panamint to Ponderosa, all because a secretary asked about the trees.
Hey, Joe, come back here! Joe! Joe!
Hidden fact number 3. A singing scene nearly destroyed the show before episode 1. This might be the closest call in Bonanza history, a story that makes you wonder how television ever survives its own bad ideas. The pilot episode contained a scene so cringeworthy, so embarrassingly misjudged, that it could have ended the series before it even began. Producers filmed 3 of the Cartwrights singing the theme song lyrics while riding back to the ranch at the close of that first episode. Now, you might be thinking that doesn't sound so bad, but wait until you hear what those original lyrics actually said, including gems like "I've got a flair for women everywhere, Bonanza." Picture it, Ben, Hoss, and Little Joe riding along belting out these ridiculous lyrics with no musical accompaniment whatsoever, just 3 grown men on horses singing about their flair for women. And here's where it gets even better. Pernell Roberts, the only professionally trained singer among the 4 leads, took one look at that scene and refused to participate, apparently abstaining from the singing entirely and just untethering his horse reins while the other 3 actors bellowed out those original lyrics, completely unaccompanied. Fortunately, someone at the network had the good sense to recognize disaster when they saw it. Before the premiere aired, executives deemed the footage too campy and edited it out completely, replacing it with the Cartwrights shown wordlessly howling and shouting as they returned home. Still a bit odd, but infinitely better than the alternative. Here's the remarkable part. That embarrassing footage wasn't destroyed, surviving as a DVD bonus feature. Fans who've seen it describe it as hilarious, which is probably the kindest word you could use. One bad creative decision, one moment of questionable judgment, and the Ponderosa might have been nothing more than an obscure footnote in TV history. Television's longest-running Western came that close to being a one-episode joke. Hidden fact number 4. 3 of the 4 Cartwrights wore wigs, and one had a floating toupee disaster. Those rugged Cartwright men riding across the Nevada landscape with their hair flowing in the wind, well, most of that hair wasn't real. Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, and Dan Blocker all wore hairpieces throughout the series, and even Victor Sen Young, who played the family cook Hop Sing, wore a rat-tail queue. Natural hair belonged only to Michael Landon, and even he had his own secret, famously dyeing his hair after going gray in his 20s. Watching the Cartwrights ride across the Ponderosa meant watching a family of men in wigs pretending to be rugged frontiersmen. Television glamour, as it turns out, involves a lot of artificial assistance, but here's where the story gets truly memorable. Lorne Greene's toupee caused one of the most embarrassing moments in the show's production history. During the filming of a water scene, Greene jumped into a tank, and what happened next silenced the entire crew. His hairpiece came loose and floated to the surface of the water, before Greene himself did. A split-second decision came from pure instinct as Greene grabbed the floating toupee, pulled it underwater, and emerged from the tank with the wig sitting askew on his head. Without saying a word, without acknowledging what had just happened, he walked silently to his trailer while the entire crew stood there trying not to laugh. Nobody said anything. Greene never mentioned it. The whole crew just snickered quietly and moved on with their day. It's one of those moments that everyone present probably remembered for the rest of their lives, but nobody dared bring up in front of the star of the show. The patriarch of the Cartwright family, the dignified Ben Cartwright, fishing his floating hair out of a water tank. That's an image that's hard to forget once you've heard about it.
Hey, somebody's shooting at somebody.
Hidden fact number 5. Lorne Greene was barely older than his sons, and Landon wore 4-inch lifts. Speaking of things that weren't quite what they seemed, the Cartwright family dynamics required some serious behind-the-scenes manipulation to maintain. Lorne Greene was cast as the patriarch, the wise father figure to 3 adult sons. But here's the mathematical problem the producers faced. Greene was only 44 years old when the series began, while Pernell Roberts and Dan Blocker, who played his 2 oldest sons, were both 31. 13 years. That was the entire age gap between Lorne Greene and the actors playing his sons. A 13-year gap between a father and his adult children would mean Ben Cartwright became a father at around age 13, and obviously that's not the story the show was telling. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Roberts and Blocker, who played brothers, were almost exactly the same age in real life, born just 6 months apart, making the actors playing Adam and Hoss closer in age than many actual siblings. Aging makeup on Greene helped him appear older and more distinguished, and combined with his natural gravitas and that deep voice, audiences bought the illusion completely. But seeing the 4 actors standing together off camera would have made the family resemblance seem a lot less convincing. Michael Landon had a different problem entirely, since he was significantly shorter than his co-stars, and in the world of television westerns, leading men were expected to be tall and imposing. 4-inch platform lifts hidden inside his boots became Landon's solution throughout the entire run of the series. That's right, Little Joe's boots had 4 extra inches of height built into them, and Landon apparently grew so accustomed to this solution that he continued the practice years later on Little House on the Prairie. His height insecurity followed him from one iconic television series to another. The Cartwright family illusion came together through a combination of aging makeup, camera tricks, hidden platform shoes, and the willingness of audiences to believe what they saw on screen. Television magic at its finest. Hidden fact number 6. Pernell Roberts called the show junk television and walked away from $1 million. If you watched Bonanza during its original run, you remember when Adam Cartwright disappeared after season 6. The oldest Cartwright son simply vanished from the series, and the show went on without him. But the story behind that departure remains one of the most dramatic exits in television history. Pernell Roberts was not like the other cast members, having trained as a Shakespearean actor and won a Drama Desk Award for his off-Broadway performance in Macbeth. Serious artistry defined his self-image, and he never made any secret of his disdain for the show that made him famous. Junk television was what Roberts called Bonanza, and he went even further, accusing NBC of perpetuating banality and contributing to the dehumanization of the industry. These weren't private complaints whispered to friends, since Roberts was publicly contemptuous of the series that was paying his salary. His frustrations ran deep and specific. Resentment came from playing an adult character who constantly had to seek his father's approval, which Roberts described as an impotent role. Criticism followed for the show's lack of diversity and the use of white actors playing Native American characters. Principles drove this man, and his principles were increasingly at odds with the show he was contractually obligated to appear in. Those principles extended beyond the soundstage. In 1965, Pernell Roberts participated in the Selma to Montgomery civil rights marches, willing to put himself on the line for causes he believed in, and equally willing to walk away from a fortune when his conscience demanded it. Lorne Greene, ever the pragmatist, tried to talk sense into his co-star, advising Roberts to stay with the series a few more years because the money would eventually give him the freedom to pursue his artistic ambitions. "You'll be able to build your own theater and hire Tennessee Williams to write a play for you," Greene told him. Roberts didn't listen. When asked later about leaving a guaranteed fortune behind, Roberts gave a response that perfectly captured his attitude. "Okay, so I threw away $1 million, so what? All I cared about was my emotional well-being." $1 million in the 1960s, an amount that adjusted for inflation represents life-changing money, and Roberts simply walked away from it because he couldn't stomach another season of what he considered beneath his talents. The producers warned him that his exit would have consequences beyond Bonanza, telling him he'd be used as an example to keep other actors in line, a cautionary tale about what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. That prediction proved accurate for decades, with Pernell Roberts becoming the industry's go-to example of an actor who let his ego destroy his career. Whether you admire his principles or question his judgment, you have to admit it takes a certain kind of conviction to walk away from that much money on principle.
You see, I only saw the good side of him.
Hidden fact number 7. Dan Blocker was no gentle giant. He had a master's degree and broke his own collarbone on purpose. If you grew up loving Hoss Cartwright, you probably remember him as the gentle, somewhat simple-minded middle brother, lovable, loyal, and not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. But the actor behind that character couldn't have been more different from the role he played. A master's degree made Dan Blocker the only cast member with graduate-level education, earned in dramatic arts from Sul Ross State University, and when he was cast in Bonanza, he was actively pursuing his PhD at UCLA. Before becoming a television star, Blocker worked as a high school English and drama teacher. The actor America loved as the intellectually limited Hoss was, in real life, one of the most educated people on the set, a scholar of dramatic arts, a teacher, and an academic pursuing the highest level of educational achievement. Yet he played that simple-hearted character so convincingly that generations of viewers never suspected the intelligence behind the performance. Blocker's physical presence was equally remarkable, and the stories of his toughness have become Hollywood legend. 14 pounds at birth reportedly made him the largest baby ever recorded in Bowie County, Texas. The man was massive from the moment he entered the world. Before Bonanza, Blocker served in Korea during the war, was wounded in combat, and received the Purple Heart for his service. Pain and hardship were not unfamiliar to this man. And that brings us to the most incredible Dan Blocker story of all. During one Bonanza filming session, Blocker suffered a serious injury, breaking his own collarbone. What he did next has become the stuff of production legend. Rather than stop filming, rather than call for medical attention, Blocker pushed the protruding bone back into his skin and continued working, finishing the scene, completing his work for the day, and dealing with his injury afterward. The gentle giant of the Ponderosa pushed a broken bone back into place and kept acting as if nothing had happened. Toughness that Hoss Cartwright occasionally displayed on screen was nothing compared to the real toughness of the man playing him. Tragically, that same physical resilience couldn't save Blocker from the medical crisis that ended his life. In 1972, Dan Blocker died from a pulmonary embolism following what should have been routine gallbladder surgery, just 43 years old. His death would devastate the cast and, as we'll discuss later, effectively end the series that had made him famous. Hidden fact number 8. Only 15 episodes were actually filmed at Lake Tahoe. Bonanza brings to mind that stunning Lake Tahoe scenery, the crystal clear water, the towering Ponderosa pines, the majestic Sierra Nevada mountains stretching toward the horizon. One of the most beautiful settings in television history became inseparable from the Cartwright family identity. Here's a number that might shock you. Out of 431 episodes, only 15 were actually filmed at the Incline Village location near Lake Tahoe. That beautiful Nevada landscape you remember, most of the time was a painted backdrop and some carefully placed trees on a California studio lot. Over 400 episodes of Bonanza were filmed on Paramount Studios soundstages in Hollywood. Simple economics explained everything. Shuttling the entire cast and crew to Lake Tahoe on a weekly basis was described by producers as cost prohibitive, since maintaining that schedule for an entire season would have been financially ruinous, even if filming occasional location sequences was manageable. Elaborate sets that could simulate the outdoor locations became the production team's solution, and they hoped audiences wouldn't notice the difference. Given that most Americans were watching on relatively small television screens, the illusion worked remarkably well. The Cartwright ranch house itself held a secret that disappointed countless visitors over the years. Those stairs leading up to the second floor led to a dead end. The bedrooms weren't up there at all, since they were filmed on a completely separate soundstage. One wall of the living room was designed to slide away so cameras could get wide shots of the interior. The cozy family home was actually a modular construction designed for efficient filming, not for realistic architecture. When the Ponderosa Ranch theme park opened and tourists got to visit a replica of the famous house, many of them found it smaller than they remembered from watching on television. Camera angles and careful framing had made that living room seem much larger than it actually was. Perfect television illusion. For over a decade, millions of Americans believed they were watching a family living in the Nevada wilderness near Lake Tahoe. In reality, they were watching actors on a Hollywood soundstage, pretending to look at scenery that existed hundreds of miles away.
Mr. Hoss! What happened to little boy?
Hidden fact number 9. The Cartwright curse killed so many women, it became a... Paying close attention to Bonanza over the years might have revealed something peculiar about the romantic lives of the Cartwright men. Every woman who got close to them ended up dead, disappeared, or otherwise removed from the story, and it happened so often that it earned its own name, the Cartwright curse. Ben Cartwright himself starts the pattern. All 3 of his wives were dead before the series even began, with the show's backstory establishing that each of his sons had a different mother, and all 3 mothers met tragic ends. A 3-time widower before audiences ever met him. And the pattern continued with his sons. Any woman who became romantically involved with Adam, Hoss, or Little Joe would inevitably meet some terrible fate, with death being the most common outcome, though disappearance and unexplained departures were also acceptable ways to remove a love interest from the show. Little Joe was the worst offender. More than 50 women were romantically linked to the youngest Cartwright brother over the course of the series, and most of them met tragic ends. The pattern became such a noticeable phenomenon that even the cast couldn't ignore it. Michael Landon himself joked about it, quipping that the Cartwrights had to be careful or their horses would trip over the graves of one of the past female characters. When the star of the show is making jokes about how many women his character has indirectly killed, the pattern has clearly become absurd. A reason actually existed for this murderous romantic track record. Producers discovered early on that audiences, particularly female viewers, preferred the Cartwright men as eligible bachelors. When producers attempted to give Adam a permanent wife, a character named Laura Dayton, as a way to keep the unhappy Pernell Roberts interested in staying with the show, NBC was overwhelmed with protests from fans. The lesson came through clear. The Cartwright men were supposed to remain available, and the bachelor formula was sacred. Women kept dying, graves kept multiplying, and the Cartwright curse became one of television's most reliable, if morbid, plot devices. Hidden fact number 10. Guest stars were paid more than the main cast in the early seasons. The economics of early Bonanza might surprise you. In those shaky first seasons, when the show struggled for ratings and fought for survival, guest stars actually earned more money than the regular cast. Perfect Sense emerges from a business perspective. Bonanza's main cast was largely unknown when the series began, with Lorne Greene, Pernell Roberts, Dan Blocker, and Michael Landon lacking household name status. Working actors with limited power, all of them. But surviving those early rating struggles meant Bonanza needed star power, recognizable faces that would draw viewers who might otherwise tune in to Perry Mason or whatever else was competing for their attention. Those recognizable faces commanded premium salaries. Established stars came in as guest performers, earned handsome paychecks, and hopefully boosted the ratings enough to keep the series alive. And the list of guest stars who walked across the Ponderosa over the years is absolutely remarkable. Star Trek fans will appreciate this fact. Every major cast member from the original Star Trek series appeared on Bonanza as a guest star, including William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, George Takei, and Nichelle Nichols, all making appearances on the show before they became famous for boldly going where no one had gone before. The list goes on and on. Dennis Hopper appeared on Bonanza before Easy Rider made him a counterculture icon, and Adam West walked the Ponderosa before he put on the Batman cape. Cesar Romero and Burgess Meredith, who would later play Batman villains, both appeared as guests. Zsa Gabor showed up, Lee Marvin made an appearance, Tina Louise and Dawn Wells from Gilligan's Island both worked on Bonanza, and Yvonne DiCarlo from The Munsters stopped by. A young Jodie Foster appeared on the show before she became one of the most acclaimed actresses of her generation. And here's one that might surprise you. Bob Barker made his first television acting appearance on Bonanza in 1960. Years before he became synonymous with The Price is Right, Bob Barker was trying his hand at Western drama on the Ponderosa. The guest star strategy worked. The show survived its early struggles, built an audience, and eventually became the most watched program in America. But for those first couple of seasons, the people passing through earned more than the family who lived there.
What sort of pretty things do you look for?
Hidden fact number 11. The theme song was written in one day for $500. That iconic Bonanza theme, one of the most recognizable pieces of television music ever composed, has a creation story that makes you appreciate just how different the entertainment industry used to be. Legendary songwriters Jay Livingston and Ray Evans created it, the same composers who had already written Mona Lisa, Que Sera Sera, and the theme for Mr. Ed, established talents with a proven track record. Their instructions for the Bonanza theme were remarkably simple: make it short, make it cheap, and make it sound like strong men were riding into somewhere with a Western or March flavor. That was it. No lengthy creative briefs, no multiple rounds of revision, no focus group testing. Just a simple set of requirements and a deadline. A single day is all it took for Livingston and Evans to deliver the finished theme, which they sold to NBC for $500, receiving an additional $1,500 when it aired. $2,000 total for one of the most iconic television themes ever written. That theme now ranks among the top 100 Western songs of all time according to the Western Writers of America, having been heard by literally billions of people around the world. And the composers received $2,000 for a day's work. The theme's success extended beyond the show itself. An instrumental version recorded by Al Caiola reached number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1961, and Johnny Cash recorded his own version with rewritten lyrics in 1962. When you hear that theme today, those galloping rhythms, that sense of adventure and purpose, you're hearing the result of a single day of creative work. Livingston and Evans sat down with their simple instructions, wrote something timeless, and moved on to their next project. Sometimes the creative process really is that straightforward. Hidden fact number 12. Lorne Greene's #1 hit Ringo was mistaken for a Beatles song. December of 1964 saw Lorne Greene achieve something truly unprecedented for a television Western star, a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Ringo was a spoken-word ballad, with Greene essentially narrating a story over music rather than singing in the traditional sense. That distinctive deep voice that made him perfect for the role of Ben Cartwright translated surprisingly well to the recording studio, and the song dominated the easy listening chart for 6 consecutive weeks. But here's where the story gets amusing. Some teenage record buyers purchased Ringo believing it was somehow connected to the Beatles, since 1964 was the height of Beatlemania, and one of the Fab Four was named Ringo Starr. How were teenagers supposed to know that Lorne Greene's song was actually about a Western gunfighter? Disappointment must have followed when those young Beatles fans put the record on their turntables and heard the voice of Ben Cartwright narrating a cowboy tale instead of the rock and roll they were expecting. Greene's musical success wasn't entirely surprising when you consider his background. Before becoming an actor, he had been Canada's principal radio newsreader during World War II, delivering news of the war to Canadian audiences, and given the grim nature of most wartime updates, Greene had earned a rather dark nickname, the Voice of Doom. That same authoritative, resonant voice that had once delivered news of battles and casualties became the voice of America's favorite television patriarch. And for one brief shining moment in late 1964, it also became the voice of a #1 pop song. A strange footnote in pop music history. For a few weeks, the biggest song in America was a spoken-word Western ballad performed by a TV cowboy, and some of the people buying it thought they were getting a Beatles record. Hidden fact number 13. Dan Blocker founded the Bonanza steakhouse chain. Then a trademark war created chaos. A piece of Bonanza history that extended far beyond the television screen and into restaurants across America begins here. 1963 saw Dan Blocker become a partner in a new restaurant venture called the Bonanza Sirloin Pit, built on a simple concept of affordable steak dinners for American families. Partial ownership came to Blocker in exchange for appearing in character as Haas for promotional purposes. The prices at those original Bonanza restaurants seem almost unbelievable today. 99 cents bought a steak dinner, and a family of 5 could eat heartily for under $6. Working-class dining at its finest, and the Haas-Cartwright connection gave it immediate name recognition. The chain grew rapidly, eventually reaching approximately 600 locations. But here's where the story gets complicated. 1965 brought a separate company in Kokomo, Indiana, founding a restaurant called Ponderosa Steakhouse. The name was obviously inspired by Bonanza, but this new venture had no official connection to Dan Blocker or the television show. When the Bonanza Restaurant Corporation discovered this competitor using the Ponderosa name, they moved quickly to protect what they assumed was their intellectual property, trademarking Ponderosa to prevent this upstart company from trading on their association with the TV show. But the founders of Ponderosa Steakhouse were clever and noticed something interesting. Bonanza's corporate owners hadn't actually trademarked the name Bonanza itself. Ponderosa trademarked Bonanza. Think about that for a moment. The Bonanza restaurants trademarked Ponderosa, and the Ponderosa restaurants trademarked Bonanza. Each company now owned the other's name. The solution became one of the strangest corporate deals in restaurant history. The two companies simply swapped trademarks, each giving the other the rights to their own name, and they continued operating as competitors. Years later, in 1989, the two chains merged, creating over 1,300 combined locations worldwide. The companies that had once fought over each other's names became one unified corporation. Only about 15 locations remain today. The glory days of the 99-cent steak dinner are long gone. But for decades, you could drive through almost any American town and find a reminder of Bonanza's cultural impact, not on a television screen, but on a restaurant sign. Hidden fact number 14. The first season opening credits show visible tire tracks from the camera truck. A production error that made it into one of the most watched opening sequences in television history comes next. Watching the first season opening credits of Bonanza carefully, really carefully, reveals something that definitely shouldn't be there. On the dirt road in front of the galloping Cartwright horses, unmistakable tire tracks from the camera truck are clearly visible. The production crew apparently never noticed, or if they did notice, they didn't have the budget to reshoot one of television's most iconic opening sequences. Those tire tracks stayed right where they were, broadcast into millions of American homes week after week, the kind of detail that seems impossible once you know about it. How could nobody have noticed? How did this make it through all the levels of production review and approval? But television in the late 1950s was a different world, with episodes produced on tight schedules with limited budgets, and sometimes imperfections simply slipped through. Once you know the tire tracks are there, you can't unsee them. A permanent reminder that behind every polished television production, there's a crew working under pressure, making do with what they have, and occasionally leaving evidence of their presence right there on screen.
Sounds lovely.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Hidden fact number 15. The burning map was created by Shirley Temple's cousin. That legendary opening sequence, the map of the Ponderosa that bursts into flames as the theme music plays, is one of the most recognizable images in television history. And the artist who created it had a surprising family connection. Robert Temple Ayres created the map, a Hollywood set illustrator working at Paramount in 1959. The official title of his creation was Map to illustrate the Ponderosa in Nevada. A famous relative connected heirs to Hollywood royalty, since he was a cousin of child star Shirley Temple. The man who drew the most famous map in Western television history shared a family tree with one of the most famous child performers in movie history. Creating the burning effect required some trial and error. The original map wasn't actually the one that burned on camera, since the production crew made several imperfect copies, attempting the burn again and again until they had one that, as they put it, burned right on camera. Getting flames to look dramatic and appropriate for the opening sequence apparently took multiple attempts. A long life followed for Ayers, who passed away on February 25, 2012, at the age of 98. According to reports, he made one last pilgrimage to view his iconic artwork just 3 days before he died. For over 50 years, that burning map opened every episode of Bonanza, seen by billions of viewers, becoming inseparable from the Cartwright family identity. And the man who drew it got to see his creation one final time before the end. Hidden fact number 16. The show caused total depopulation of streets in communist Poland. Bonanza wasn't just an American phenomenon. Staggering international reach extended to 97 countries with an estimated 480 million viewers worldwide by 1973. But nowhere was the show's impact more dramatic than behind the Iron Curtain. Communist Poland during the 1960s and 70s saw Bonanza become so popular that it reportedly caused what observers described as almost total depopulation of streets during airtime. When the Cartwrights were on television, the streets of Polish cities emptied as people rushed home to watch. The appeal is easy to understand. Entertainment that had nothing to do with state propaganda, nothing to do with communist ideology, nothing to do with the political circumstances of everyday life in Soviet-controlled Poland. Pure escapism, a family dealing with problems that had nothing to do with the Cold War. For viewers living under authoritarian rule, that kind of escape was precious. The show's international appeal extended to the highest levels of society. Queen Elizabeth II herself was a fan, telling members of the cast that she and her 3 children were faithful Bonanza viewers. The range of that audience for a moment deserves consideration. From Polish workers seeking escape from communist reality to the British royal family, Bonanza somehow managed to speak to viewers across every imaginable boundary of geography, politics, culture, and class. Universal themes of family loyalty, frontier justice, and adventure apparently translated across all those barriers. The Cartwrights didn't need a translator to connect with audiences from Warsaw to Buckingham Palace.
We know who you are and what you're here for. You can die now or later.
Hidden fact number 17. Michael Landon was considered a brat who made production miserable. Behind Little Joe's charming smile and boyish appeal was a perfectionist who frustrated nearly everyone who worked with him. Director William Claxton didn't mince words, calling Landon a brat. Producer David Dortort was equally direct, saying that Landon grew difficult during the last 5 seasons of the series, and according to Dortort, nearly every line, every scene, every setup, everything would halt for endless story conferences on the set. Production would grind to a stop while Landon insisted on discussing and debating creative choices. For a show that needed to produce episodes on a regular schedule with a limited budget, this kind of behavior maddened the people responsible for keeping things on track. Fairness requires acknowledging what Landon brought to the production despite his difficult reputation. Perfectionist energy channeled into genuine creative contributions, with Landon writing over 30 scripts for Bonanza and directing 14 episodes himself. Financial rewards followed this creative involvement. Between $2,500 and $2,750 came with each script, on top of his regular acting salary of $11,000 to $12,000 per episode. Feuds with co-star Pernell Roberts were openly discussed in the media, with both men publicly criticizing each other, making no effort to hide their mutual antipathy. Whatever the Cartwright brothers felt for each other on screen, the actors playing them were not friends. Beyond his on-set intensity, Landon was also known for bizarre pranks that left his colleagues bewildered. Toads would leap from his mouth as a joke. He dressed as a superhero to visit pizza parlors, and he once convinced Johnny Carson that he'd run over a restaurant owner's cat. Perfectionism, creative ambition, public feuding, and eccentric pranks combined to make Landon one of the most complicated figures in the Bonanza story. Difficult, yes, but also driving the creative engine of one of television's most successful shows. Hidden fact number 18. At its peak, 58% of all televisions in America were tuned to Bonanza. The numbers behind Bonanza's dominance are almost impossible to comprehend by modern standards. First quarter of 1964 saw the show achieve a 39.7 Nielsen rating with a 58 share. What that means in practical terms is that nearly 6 out of every 10 televisions in America were tuned to the Cartwrights on Sunday nights. 58%. In an era before streaming, before DVRs, before hundreds of cable channels, American families gathered around their television sets on Sunday evenings, and the majority of them were watching Bonanza. Over 19 million viewers per episode represented the average during its mid-1960s peak. 3 consecutive seasons at number 1, from 1964 through 1967. 9 consecutive seasons in the top 5, a record that stood for years. Cast salaries reflected this unprecedented success. $20,000 per episode went to Lorne Greene, which in today's money would be roughly $190,000. Between $10,000 and $12,000 each per episode went to the other leads. When Pernell Roberts departed after season 6, Michael Landon offered a characteristically blunt assessment of the financial impact. "We took 1 leaf out of the dining room table," he quipped, "and we all made more money because we split the take 3 ways instead of 4. A reminder of just how different television was in that era. Today, a hit show might capture 5 or 6% of the viewing audience. A single program commanding nearly 60% of all televisions seems like ancient history because it is. Bonanza's ratings peak represented a moment in American culture that simply cannot be replicated. The Cartwrights weren't just popular. They were practically universal.
Why don't you rest a few minutes? I'll keep watch.
Hidden fact number 19. Dan Blocker's death effectively killed the show and made television history. May 13, 1972 brought sudden tragedy when Dan Blocker died from a pulmonary embolism following gallbladder surgery, leaving Bonanza with an impossible choice. What do you do when a major character dies in real life? Do you recast the role and pretend nothing happened? Do you write the character out with some contrived explanation? Or do you acknowledge the death directly and deal with its consequences on screen? The third option became Bonanza's choice, and in doing so, television history was made. The first television show to directly address the death of a major young male character rather than recasting the role. This decision, unprecedented at the time, established a template that would influence television for decades. Genuine grief pervaded the scenes behind the scenes. Lorne Greene later recalled his immediate reaction to Blocker's death. "After Dan's death, I didn't see how the show could continue," he said. "I said to my wife, that's it, it's finished." Writing the first episode to air after Blocker's passing fell to Michael Landon, who titled it Forever, and approached it with unusual restraint, using what was described as a kind of stillness and gaps in dialogue to convey genuine grief rather than manufactured drama. A wedding episode had already been written for Haas, but obviously that couldn't air as planned. Landon rewrote the episode, transferring the wedding to Little Joe instead. The final season of Bonanza without Haas remains, according to industry observers, by far the least popular and least requested season in the show's rerun package. Audiences simply didn't want to watch the Cartwrights without their beloved gentle giant. But ratings troubles weren't just about the absence of Blocker. NBC moved the show to Tuesday nights, placing it directly opposite Maude, the spin-off starring B. Arthur. Industry observers called this scheduling decision a virtual death sentence. Losing Blocker and facing brutal competition combined to prove fatal. Ratings plummeted from the top 20 all the way down to number 52. The show that had once commanded 58% of American televisions now struggled to attract an audience. Hidden fact number 20. Bonanza ended without a final episode, and its legacy lives on in unexpected ways. January 16, 1973 marked Bonanza's final episode. And if you were expecting a grand finale, a dramatic conclusion that tied up all the storylines and gave the Cartwrights a proper send-off, disappointment would have followed. No special finale, no flashbacks to memorable moments, no final ride into the sunset. The show simply ended, canceled after 14 seasons, with the same kind of unceremonious conclusion that befalls most television series, 431 episodes, over a decade of dominating American television. A genuine cultural phenomenon that reached 97 countries and 480 million viewers, and Bonanza just stopped. But the show's legacy extended far beyond its final broadcast. Pioneering the family-focused Western proved that audiences cared as much about relationships as they did about gunfights. Proving that color television was commercially viable helped establish the standard that would eventually replace black and white broadcasting entirely. Progressive social issues were tackled decades ahead of their time. A restaurant empire was spawned that fed millions of American families. The Ponderosa Ranch theme park operated for 37 years and served 3 million Haas burgers before closing in 2004. Michael Landon's career as a writer and director launched from here, skills that would lead him to create Little House on the Prairie and Highway to Heaven, shows that continued the Bonanza tradition of family-centered drama. $38 million. That's what the real Lake Tahoe property associated with the show sold for in 2020, proving that the Ponderosa name still carries value more than 60 years after the series premiered. And somewhere, on streaming services and in syndication packages around the world, the Cartwrights continue their endless ride across the burning map. The tire tracks are still there if you know where to look. The wigs are still in place. The platform lifts remain hidden inside Little Joe's boots. The illusions that made Bonanza work are still working, decades after the cameras stopped rolling. 20 hidden facts about Bonanza that reveal the incredible story behind one of television's most beloved series. A singing scene that almost ended everything before it began, the floating toupee incident that nobody dared mention, and the tragedy of Dan Blocker's death that brought the whole enterprise to its knees. The true history of Bonanza is every bit as dramatic as anything the Cartwrights faced on screen. The next time you watch Ben, Adam, Hoss, and Little Joe ride across the Ponderosa, you'll see it all a little differently. The wigs and the platform lifts become visible once you know about them. That Lake Tahoe scenery was usually a Hollywood soundstage. The family dynamics were as complicated behind the camera as they were in the script, but appreciation follows for just how remarkable it was that this show, created partly to sell color televisions, became a genuine cultural touchstone that reached hundreds of millions of people around the world. Saturday night time slot designed for department store shoppers to #1 show in America, Panamint to Ponderosa, near cancellation to cultural immortality. That's the real story of Bonanza, and now you know it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.